Good morning, good afternoon, good night, my dears. Welcome to the Worldwide Podcast. And wow, I'm really amazed. Before recording this episode, and I just don't want to give you guys a spoiler. I just want to ask, how's Guilherme? How's it going, bro?
Okay, no spoiler
No
yet.
spoiler. Not saying which episode is it. I mean, you guys already know because you're here. Listen to
The
it.
title, but now you'll know the second time.
Yeah,
Um, I-
exactly.
I'm good, guys. I'm good. I'm so excited about this episode. One, because it will be a very unusual for us, because even though it's not a country, it still is something that's important to the world. It's a continent that belongs to a lot of countries in a way. And I was thinking, I wanted to do something about this episode. And I was like, I could try to contact the 11 people that were born there, that they probably don't even
Is
know what
it?
Antarctica is
Are
because they were
there?
just born in the base camp. Yeah. They were
Really?
just born there and then they went back to their countries, most probably.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, I want someone who has done something very interesting and peculiar and really, really dope to the world.
And
So obviously I was
represented the continent at the same time.
exactly, and that
Yeah.
has been in the continent as seen how it actually looks like and been there. And I was a little bit addicted to these cave diving stories, and I came across our guest, Jill Heinerth. How are you doing, Jill? Are you good?
Great. Thank you. It's good to join you. Yeah.
Of course. As I had told you, even in our previous call, I've been so addicted to these cave diving stories, and it made me fascinated, but also terrified. Like, I don't know if I had willpower and courage to do what you do, but I'm fascinated by it. So I'm so
Really.
excited to talk
Yeah.
about it for
Just,
sure.
just
Well,
giving a spoiler of it, like really, just scare me off. Really, just watching your TED talks and also the video Guilherme has shared with me. I was just like, come on, I could never do this. Wow.
you guys are smart. If you're scared, if you're claustrophobic, if it makes you a little uncomfortable, that's probably good. It means understand risk.
100%. And yeah, to discuss now about Antarctica and your expedition that I know that you've talked countless times, but there's still like to discuss more about the Antarctica part of it, how it was being there, expectations, reality, all of that. It's going to be very interesting, I would think. So actually, starting off, before you even reached Antarctica, the expectations that you had and the reality that was big there, how was all of that for you?
Oh, wow. Totally different than what I expected. So, just as a bit of a backstory,
Mhm.
it was more than 20 years ago when I went to Antarctica for the first time. And I went with the intention to be the first person to cave dive inside an iceberg in Antarctica. So, I start doing all kinds of research, and I was already like, I had already read a lot of books on Shackleton and Mawson and Scott and all these great explorers. And yet, when you're doing something that nobody's ever done before, there's not really like a handbook or a map for
Uncharted
that matter.
territories, yes.
Yeah.
Uncharted territories, absolutely.
Yeah, and the journey to get there is enough of an adventure on its own because I left from New Zealand. Well, I left from Canada, I went to New Zealand, and then did a 12-day crossing over the Southern Ocean. And so it really gives you a sense of how far away, how remote you are, and just how wild and untouched that environment is.
No, I can imagine. And have you had been to the Arctic before, or this
Yeah.
was your
Mhm.
first? Okay, so how
Yeah.
different is that, right? Because the Arctic, by what I've seen, has a lot of wildlife and more diversity, I would imagine, and more natives. And then Antarctica is
Well,
like polar opposites almost. You
yeah,
can, yeah,
yeah.
speak from experience.
Polar opposite is a good way
Quite
to put
literally,
it.
location wise.
Yeah, yeah. So I am from Canada, born in Canada, and so the Canadian Arctic is vast. It's the majority of
Yeah.
our country, actually, and it's totally different than Antarctica because there is an indigenous population that lives and still lives in connection with the land and small communities, and yet, like, the frozen sea ice sits on top of the ocean in the Arctic. So it's a different kind of environment than Antarctica, where there's a big landscape beneath beneath all the snow and ice, like 2 miles thick and more of ice in Antarctica. So it's a really different environment. The animals are completely different. And then, of course, when you go to Antarctica and there's no people
Oh
other
yeah.
than scientific
Ice.
bases, it's different. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, the craziest thing are the polar bears, because I always, in my mind, I
Yeah,
always thought like the Antarctica
bro.
was home for the polar bears, and it's only the Arctic. Like
Yeah.
Right.
there's only
Yeah.
penguins in Antarctica,
Only
basically.
penguins, guys,
Seals,
man. It's very chill.
Yeah.
underwater creatures. There's a ton of them, I can
Mhm.
imagine, but
Mhm.
let's say
Mhm.
terrain
In the
animals.
ice. Yeah, just
Yeah, in the
penguins.
ice,
Yeah.
penguins and seals, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, interestingly, like in the Arctic, I was the first woman to jump into the water with wild polar bears to film them for a documentary. And that's one of the craziest things I've ever done. But it felt kind of like when I was jumping in the water with leopard seals in Antarctica. But despite the fact that those leopard seals can be, as big as a small van, I
Yeah,
still
they're
felt
huge.
a lot more at risk in the Arctic with the polar bears. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, polar bears are probably the most dangerous animal because they're very
Yeah.
territorial and they attack. I have these Norwegian friends. They made a trip to Svalbard, and there's
Mhm.
crazy regulations with polar bears. Like you have to walk with
Mhm.
a rifle. All the
Yep.
cars. This was the craziest fact
For
that he
real?
told me. It's illegal to lock the car doors because if someone is being chased by a polar bear, they need to be able to lock themselves in the car. That was like so
Yeah.
interesting. And yeah,
Yeah.
he told me like if you see a polar bear, it means that you have to straight away run. Don't try to intimidate him like people do in the US with grizzly bears. That doesn't work. You just have to run.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, we have 24/7 bear guards in the north. Like everybody carries a rifle. And not that you ever want to shoot a bear, but you've got to be ready to scare them off. So we'll,
Ready, yeah.
Mhm.
run
Sound.
at them with a snowmobile, use sound, firecrackers, things like that. But when I went to Antarctica the first time, I was warned about both the leopard seals and the orcas, and I was told that I should bring what's called a power head. So it's like a spear gun pole that has a cartridge that holds a bullet on the end of it, and if something was so close to you that you're being attacked, then you can jam it against the flesh of the leopard seal to shoot it, basically.
Have you ever
And
used this?
no, well, the funny thing is we took them with us,
Okay.
but I just thought, you know what, if I'm leopard seal bait, it is what it is. Because the other risk is like, what are you going to do with that? Like stuff it
Sure.
in a pocket? What if you accidentally like bump into something and deploy it?
100%.
Yeah, exactly. That
So I thought,
I've
I'll
heard
take my chances.
yeah, I've heard crazy stories about harpoons getting like deployed accidentally and then shooting an inmate, a coworker, not an inmate,
Yeah,
a coworker,
yeah,
and all that. Well,
yeah.
before we jump into the how it felt like diving in the iceberg and everything, how did you actually fund this, and where did the idea came from? How did all of that happen
Mhm.
for you?
Well, my colleague Wes Giles and I were like both just fascinated with Antarctic exploration, and we wanted to find a way to do a project there because we're both underwater filmmakers and good storytellers, and we also had the opportunity at the time to pitch a story to National Geographic for a film and magazine article, and so our original thought was that we were going to pitch a story to basically follow in Shackleton's footsteps from New Zealand to Antarctica and try and sort of mirror some of his exploration feats, but 100 years after his work. But as we were starting to think of ideas and developing scripts and things like that, then the largest iceberg in recorded history broke away from the Antarctic ice shelf, from the Ross ice shelf. And that's when I said to Wes, I'm like, oh, this is the story. Climate change, sea level rise. And interestingly, so this would have been in the year 2000. But interestingly, at the time, as I wrote the
20 years
script
ago.
for, yeah,
More
yeah,
than
I
20.
wrote, yeah. I wrote the script for the documentary film, and people were saying, "Oh, you can't use those terms, sea level rise and, climate change. That's not proven science. That's like really political." And I'm like, look at it today. We're very concerned about the state of ice in
Exactly. At
this
that time, I
world.
can imagine like your conspiracy theories. Stop with that. That's not true.
Mhm.
And then now it's like, oh,
Right.
actually,
Actually, it matters. Yeah,
yeah.
because that piece of ice was as big as the country of Jamaica.
And that is
So,
insane. That's bigger than Portugal, way bigger than Portugal.
yeah,
So just thinking to
yeah,
me, that's you
Bro,
know
crazy. Yeah.
crazy.
yeah. And it took until 2 years ago for that iceberg to completely melt into the ocean. And so imagine that iceberg was originally snow and ice on top of the landscape in Antarctica. And so what happens with like ice on the land is it moves downhill basically towards the ocean. Same thing with Greenland. And then you get like an ice sheet that's sort of like hanging off the edge, sort of, so there's water beneath but ice on top.
Mhm.
And then eventually like cracks develop and these things break away under situations of warming. So what that means is that was a Jamaica sized chunk of ice that used to live on land that is now melted into the ocean. So that's what contributes to sea level rise. And that's a lot of stuff. It's a lot
Yeah.
of ice.
Jesus.
And you basically
Yeah.
then made this hypothesis, which is like, okay,
Mhm.
are there caves inside icebergs?
Right.
And guess what?
Right.
We can test it out. We can prove it. So
Mhm.
let's create this expedition and have a team and then see to ourselves if it exists and we can make a documentary out of it, which
Yeah,
is again the
exactly.
first ever documented footage of inside an iceberg, which is
Mhm.
insane
Yeah.
in my head. So yeah, it takes a different type of bravery that only a very selected few can actually do it.
Yeah. Because you're
Oh.
searching for the unknown.
It's
Mhm.
It's
yeah.
just
Yeah.
it's just crazy.
And the biggest fear in mankind is the unknown. It's when we don't
Yeah.
know what to expect. It scares
Mhm.
us. But then we have people like Jill. They're like, okay, let's go. I love exploring new unknown locations that I don't know nothing about.
Yeah. I'm still scared, but but I'm willing.
Oh yeah.
Oh, amazing.
And all
Yeah.
with this submarine stuff, like people got to know that the ocean is very, unknown. Like we
Yeah.
only cover 20% of the whole ocean of the world. That's crazy. We know more about the space than the
Absolutely.
ocean.
Yeah.
So that's congrats first of all, Jill. Like
Yeah,
you're the
thanks.
bravest
Thanks.
person that ever came to our podcast. That's for sure. But
Oh.
wow, that's insane.
So then you pitched this idea to National Geographic. Were
Mhm.
they hesitant because again this was never done before? Maybe like, okay, we're just gonna waste money and then there's no caves. How was that
I
whole
was to
Yeah.
approach?
convince them that
Yeah,
I
convincing wise.
I think we were pretty convincing. Because the first response was, "What? There's caves inside of icebergs?" And although we didn't know for sure, we're like, "Oh yeah, there's caves inside of icebergs." So we were really positive about it. And by the end of the meeting, they were like, "Okay, we will give you the funding." Now we needed other funding that we had to seek privately as well to make it happen. But the funny
Equipment,
thing is,
can imagine.
yeah, the funny thing is that after that meeting, Emery Christoph, a remarkable explorer, he actually, put his arm around my colleague and said, "That's the biggest crock of crap I've ever heard in my life." So I was pretty nervous about like delivering after they had, funded everything, and that was a lot of pressure, a lot of stress
can
for me
imagine.
because I just wanted everything to come together the way I had envisioned.
100%. And
Mhm.
again, preparation for this, which
Yeah.
you had been to the Arctic before, so cold waters were probably not the biggest concern. Other things
Mhm.
were, but still, how were you preparing to go into
Yeah.
these uncharted territory of Antarctica and being able to actually do this diving?
Yeah. There was a lot of training and prep. I mean, the first thing we had to do is get permits, and I know you mentioned earlier that Antarctica really represents many countries because it's sort of divided up into a pie
Yeah.
shape, and different countries sort of have like authority over their little slice of the
Land
pie
of
where
it.
where they do their research. So I first applied to the United States scientific foundation that was responsible for those permits. And I told them that I was going to use rebreathers, this very advanced form of life support equipment, to do the diving. And they wrote me back and said, no, sorry, we don't approve the use of rebreathers in Antarctica. Not only will we not give you a permit, but if anything happens to you, we won't send any Coast Guard assets or anything to help you out. You're going to have to get a permit somewhere else. So I ended up getting the permit from New Zealand. They were like, oh yeah, no problem.
Didn't have even ask questions. They're like, here, rebreathers, here's the paperwork. Let's do it.
Yeah. And that technology, like that was really important to the success of the project and to my safety. So I wasn't going to bend
Exactly.
on that. And, it took another 20 years for the United States Science Foundation to approve the use of that equipment in Antarctica.
Jesus.
So yeah, but we would not have been able to do the dives that we did without it. I probably wouldn't be here today if I'd tried to do dives with traditional scuba gear. Yeah.
In Antarctica. And at that time, especially 2000,
Yeah.
how
Years
the
ago.
technology evolved from 2000 to
Mhm.
2023, just
Yeah.
way
Along the
bigger
years.
wave than obviously like 70s
Mhm.
to 90s and whatever. Like doing
Mhm.
one of the most important dives in history, I'm gonna say it, with that level of equipment and antiquity, right? Because it's old
Yeah.
stuff now.
Mhm.
It's so impressive. It's really,
Thanks.
really impressive.
Yeah, I mean
But
the gear
yeah,
is. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was gonna say the gear is
go, go,
kind
go,
of
go.
like what you'd wear for a spacewalk. It's the same technology.
Oh,
So
really?
you're wearing a dry suit, so you're basically sealed away from the environment. Now you're not warm, but you can tolerate it. So you have a lot of layers of undergarments underneath. So you're huge with all these layers. But then the actual like life support equipment, basically every breath that I exhale, rather than making bubbles and losing gas to the environment, I'm actually recycling that gas. So I'm removing carbon dioxide from the mixture, adding little additions of oxygen to make up for what my body's metabolized, and then continuing to sort of recycle that gas. So it's exactly the same thing that someone uses in their spacesuit if they're doing a spacewalk at the International Space Station. And and back in those days, it was quite new, that technology, and I was really at the cutting edge of that. And since that time, a lot of other people are now doing rebreather diving. It's definitely rising in popularity and use in scientific diving and commercial diving operations as well.
And were you with helium as well, or just oxygen and nitrogen?
So on this trip, we weren't using helium, and we made it as a safety decision because when you're down there, you're weeks and weeks and weeks away from help if something happens. So if you have a diving accident and you get the decompression illness, or the bends as we call it, then there's no way to get help. So helium and the deeper diving really brings up the danger a notch, and so we
Definitely.
decided that we would stay in the 40-meter range and use air mixes for our diving. Air and
Okay,
oxygen.
helium is only really necessary below 40 meters.
Yeah. 30 to
Because
40
of this.
meters, we usually switch to helium mixes. Yeah.
Nice. And like once you made the dive, how did you feel? Like getting out of the boat, dry suit on, all the historic equipment, then started going to the cave. How was that feeling?
Yeah. Amazing. It took us time to find what I felt was would meet the deliverables that I'd promised basically to National Geographic. So we found lots of little caverns and crevasses and little short tunnel systems in the icebergs at first, but what I wanted was this massive cave system where I could swim and swim and swim. And so it took us we were about 30 days into the project down in Antarctica before I found what I felt was like the cave that really did it, that was really something totally new and different. And on that dive, I rolled out of the Zodiac into slush, basically. So the surface of the water was about a meter of slush and chunks of ice, and I was in this sort of crack in the side of the iceberg. And so when I first started to descend, I'm descending through this slush and pushing it all out of the way. And for a brief moment, I saw a Weddell seal zip by. And then as soon as I'm below the slush and the visibility opened up, I could see this crack going way back into blackness inside this iceberg. And that's when I started to descend and drop down. And I got so excited about, this is really happening.
Jesus.
But on my very first dive inside the iceberg, my diving partner and I, Paul and I, were like hearing cracks and like all kinds of loud sounds from the ice, and that wasn't unexpected because I'd experienced that from ice diving before. Like the ice moves and cracks and makes these loud sounds that even reverberate in your sternum, And when we turned around to come back out, the entrance that we'd gone into, it was blocked by ice. So yeah, we had to find another way out of that cave the very first dive. And so that was the first
scary?
Oh yeah. As soon as I realized, holy mackerel, this is where we went in and the doorway's gone, my heart was racing, and it turns out
being consumed. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it turns out my other colleagues who were in a boat above us were absolutely freaking out because a big chunk of ice had calved away in the doorway. And when that ice hit the sea, it caused this huge wave that almost toppled them out of the boat. And they were sitting in the boat going, what do we do? There's nothing we can do. Like, none of us are capable of a rescue. Like, if they don't come back, that's it. And so they had a long wait before they knew that we were safe.
Like, for me, cave diving is the most dangerous leisure activity in the world. Mm-hmm. I think it's even more dangerous than base jumping. And again, iceberg diving has, first of all, it's not mapped. Second, there's no cords to guide you. Third, it's a piece of ice that's completely moving, so it creates currents.
Yeah.
Caves are completely changing forever. Again, cracks, sounds from hell. I can imagine those cracking sounds. Bro. Whatever they sounded like leviathans. You're probably wondering, oh, something's gonna get me below me.
And don't forget to add that she was in Antarctica, bro.
And in freezing cold waters, Jill.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I knew that what we were going to do was incredibly dangerous. I mean, just getting there, I knew we were taking a lot of risks just crossing the Southern Ocean for 12 days. But I actually wrote letters to my family before I left, and it was just everything that I, would have wished I would have said if I didn't return home safely. So the letter was just basically like, don't open this unless I don't come home.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. No, that's awesome. And yeah, once you actually reach that cave that you always wanted, I saw a clip of the crustaceans and the wildlife that you recorded. Amazing stuff.
Yeah, that was incredible to find an ecosystem, that nobody really even knew existed underneath the ice. There's a lot of life and color on the seafloor in Antarctica, and just because it's cold doesn't mean there's not a lot of life.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it must be a different type of fulfillment to, again, discover new species, help advance science. It's interesting because I also wanted to talk about this, how you switched careers. We had a similar topic in our previous episode of Tanzania. And for you, now being a scientist and before, doing office work And now you're here in Antarctica looking at a species that was never seen before by any human. And you're like, I've covered this and I've advanced science just by recording these species and knowing
Yeah.
more about this ecosystem and biome of Antarctica. So
Yeah, I mean, my first career in life, I had an advertising agency in Toronto, so I'm an artist, and
Okay.
yeah, creative professional. And you know, a couple years into my career, I was teaching scuba nights and weekends as my hobby, and I was sitting at my drafting table, just going, you know, I love the creative process. I love making art, but I want to do this underwater. So I needed to find a way to advance a career as a creative professional underwater. And so it was a big, you know, big shift. But now I get to dabble in a lot of different sciences, and I become the eyes and the hands of a scientist that can't go to a place that I can get to. So it's exciting. It means a lot of collaborating.
mhm. And what made you switch careers? I can imagine like you sitting at your agency at the desk and just like one day you were like, I need to go something more than this, something more exciting, adventurous. What made you like click?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, more than anything, it was just that I don't like being indoors. And so
She doesn't like being indoors, bro.
yeah, no, I mean the my office just
Yeah,
felt like it was closing in on me. It's funny because people look at caves and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm so claustrophobic looking at what
Yeah,
you
it's
Different
do."
type
pretty
of an
similar.
office.
Right, but it's my office that made me feel claustrophobic. And yeah, it's hard when you know, I had a successful career, I had a great business, um, but it's hard to leave that behind. And I literally
Yeah.
sold everything I owned. I walked away from the business. I moved to the Cayman Islands to start my career in diving, and it was like starting over again. And the ramp up to that took a couple of years and a lot of anxiety and stress. But as soon as I'd done it, as soon as I'd gotten rid of everything that I owned and I was down in the Caribbean, it was like, I did the
That's
right
what I
thing.
want.
I'm so
Yeah.
happy, you know?
Oh, that's the
Yeah.
best feeling ever, you know. Just being
Hmm.
happy doing
Yeah.
what you love or you're meant to do this.
Pursuing
And
passion,
definitely,
pursuing
bro.
passion truly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And risk has to come with it, which
Hmm.
scares people, of course.
Sure.
Like if someone has a well profitable agency and they're like, okay, I can sustain myself for the rest of my life, yet I'm not being stimulated and I'm not having
Getting out
any
of the
passion
comfort
doing what
zone,
I
right?
what I am doing.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then you're in
Yeah.
this situation, this bubble, but you have to pop the bubble, and popping the
Yeah.
bubble requires you
Hmm.
again selling out your agency, moving out, selling everything, starting over and building something from the ground up, which
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
again
in her
takes
case, being
immense
brave,
courage.
yeah.
And for you, I wouldn't say otherwise, because if someone is brave enough to
Yeah.
swim underneath an iceberg, they're brave enough to do that as well. But that requires still a different type of bravery, I would say. And I'm very happy that
Yeah.
you did it 100%.
Thanks.
And Jill, I
No,
mean,
for sure.
why do you get right there in the caves in Antarctica? Do you feel any difference between the caves that you've had explored before?
Oh,
What
yeah.
was the main difference? Like you just
Yeah. You
checking it
know,
out.
it's funny because most people, they hear about the sport of cave diving and they go, "Oh, like so you're swimming through wet rocks," right? And it's amazing how different caves are around the world, in different locations. Like here, in Canada, where I live, I'm exploring Canada's longest underwater cave system, and it's in fresh water, and yet it's really full of life. It's an amazing freshwater cave, but I've never seen anything like that anywhere else in the world. But other caves that I dive in are in the sea, or sometimes they're even on land, and I can go in through a hole on land and swim underground and exit in the ocean. So sometimes we have both freshwater and saltwater in one cave. And it's amazing the differences. But these caves are kind of like museums of natural history. They can tell us things, scientific investigations. Like we can learn about Earth's past climate. We can learn about the biology, interesting forms of life that have never seen the light of day. And then even some caves are cultural repositories where ancient civilizations have left behind remains and artifacts that we explore and document as well.
There was these when I was in Brazil, it was just a couple of weeks ago. I wanted João to be prepared for this episode because he hadn't heard that many stories about cave diving, and we saw this film which was exactly what you explained. The film was not good, but it was demonstrating these indigenous grounds underneath a cave, an underwater cave. And yet they also entered through a hole on terrain, and then they dived underneath, and then they exited on the ocean. So it was like all this formation with these again, these artifacts and these again, architecture in a way underneath this cave where people used to live, and now it was submerged in water because of rising sea levels and all of that. So watching that film was absolutely fascinating, even though it was not good. It was
still, I mean, the caves and also the history bit about the caves, they were actually good. I mean, the quality of the movie itself wasn't that good, but the cave itself it was impressive, so fascinating to watch the caves and stuff.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of caves in Brazil. There's actually a lot of beautiful caves in Brazil, but it's not legal to dive them because
oh no.
Yeah, they've made it illegal just because of the risk. I guess there've been a couple of fatalities in those caves, and so they said, "All right, illegal, can't cave dive," which is too bad because there's some unique formations in those caves that we don't see anywhere else.
Do they have the signs? I know that the very popular sign of like "Don't enter with the Grim Reaper."
Yes.
Do the illegal caves have those signs, or only the legal caves have it with the gates as well?
I think there are actually signs in the Brazilian caves as well. Yeah, because I know some people that went and explored those 25 years ago before they were made illegal, and they were hoping to set it up for tourism.
Yeah, Brazilian government just make it hard for everyone, not only for us, but to everybody who wants to come.
Yeah.
Do you actually? This is an interesting question. Do you think it's possible to have tourism in cave diving just because
good question,
you require so much prior knowledge and experience to be able to cave dive, and most people don't understand it. They think, okay, I have the scuba diving certificate, I can just go inside a cave, but then they don't understand silting out a cave, how to get out of it, having too much ego, going a little bit more than what you should, then I can get out now. All these currents are a big thing as well from caves. Do you think it would be possible someday?
Yeah, absolutely it is already. I mean, in the last 20-30 years, so much has changed within cave diving. It used to be very American centric, and people would always go to Florida to train, but now there's a very active and growing tourism business in Mexico, in the Riviera Maya, where people go to just for tourism, but also to learn cave diving from properly qualified cave diving instructors. So 20-30 years ago, when I started teaching in the 90s, teaching cave diving in the 90s, there weren't that many cave diving instructors, but now all over the world we have cave diving instructors, and so people can go to France or go to the Riviera Maya or parts of the Caribbean and Bahamas, or other places to learn safely with someone and do that in vacation time. Yeah.
Do they still require the certificate for cave diving, or can they just go with the? Oh, so they do require.
Yeah, so there's they can earn it with an instructor in Mexico or Florida or many other places, but there's a lot of training required beyond normal, beyond recreational scuba in order to be ready for a cave diving class. Yeah,
that was the thing I was mostly asking. If someone only has the open water certificate, would they still be able to do this type of tourism, like if it's highly regulated with someone very experienced? Mm,
In Mexico, they're well set up. So if you're just a recreational scuba diver, they can take you on what's called a cavern tour. So the difference
okay.
between a cavern and a cave is that caves have no light whatsoever. So the cavern is like the doorway where you can still
I
see
had
the
no idea.
sunlight. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So they can do like a little bit of education and then take you on a cavern tour, but you'll always be able to look over your shoulder and see the exit.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Visibility. We like that. We like that.
Yes. So yeah, it's a controlled situation, but I tell you what, the doorways to caves, those cavern zones, that's the most beautiful part because you're looking out through this archway and the colors are like nothing you've ever seen before.
Mm, for sure. And quality differences or qualities that someone should have that are different
Mm.
from recreational diving and cave diving, because I
Mhm.
imagine you failed a couple students because they didn't have these types of skills. What would
Yeah.
those skills be that are like mandatory that they
You
have?
know, yeah, more than anything, it's the mindset. You have to be open-minded, but you also have to be very like diligent with safety protocols and like when you come to take a cave diving class, I would expect a student to make a lot of mistakes. Like
Mm.
that's why they're taking training. So you don't have to arrive perfect,
Yeah, yeah.
You're in a learning experience. And so like throughout the cave diving training process, we just give someone more and more complex problems to deal with until we're convinced that they can keep their cool in the biggest emergency. So
Yeah.
we just need to be confident that they're capable of self-rescue and that they're capable and willing to do a buddy rescue if it's ever needed.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, buddy
Mm,
rescue with a
that's
silted out
important.
cave. That's
Yep.
probably the most terrifying thing like
Yeah.
ever, and that's where most accidents happen, where they cannot escape. Is when a cave is completely silted out,
Mhm.
the cord they cannot see where it is, or it's been cut off by some rock. And you just need to
Yeah.
be in this like monk mindset of like, okay,
Yeah.
I have to
Yeah.
just breathe super slowly, heart rate
Mhm.
as low as possible, and
Mhm.
let's have a plan. Just have a plan.
Yeah. I mean, in that cave diving class, you would learn everything like that, like how to patch a broken guideline, how to follow a guideline if you can't see it, how to lay that guideline. And so yeah, you learn how to do all of those things. And so if there's ever an issue down the road, all you have to do is perform what you did in your class and stick with the safety, before you get in the water, like, make sure you're jumping in with the right equipment, the right backups, the right people. And
Hmm.
and it's fine if you do. Yeah. Yeah.
And
No,
Jill.
it's
And Jill,
amazing.
what was the most dangerous, thing that ever happened in those expeditions that you've done there in
Close calls.
Antarctica? Yeah.
In Antarctica? Wow,
Yeah.
there was so much. It's funny on the way back from Antarctica, because we had 12 days sailing to get back to New Zealand again. We at one dinner we sat around the table and we all decided to share what was our scariest moment of the trip. And I was pretty shocked that there were some people who had had these scary moments that I wasn't even aware that they were, sort of in fear of their life at that moment. Like the captain let us know that he'd had a small engine fire and was like fighting fire below decks at one point that I completely did not know about. We were stuck in the ice. That had me a bit worried because at one point all the sea ice came and sealed around the ship, and for about a day and a half we were stuck in the ice. And
Jesus,
we
yeah.
had we had one colleague on board from Chile that had overwintered in Antarctica for a year, and he was quite concerned because he had been on a boat that sank in Antarctica and he was rescued like from
Before.
that boat. And so he knew there was no one to rescue us, so he was pretty worried at that
He already
point.
had the trauma. Oh my God.
Yeah. But
Sinking
even
ship in Antarctica.
yeah, even like traveling down there, the whole hull and superstructure of the vessel got covered
Mhm.
in ice just from rain and mist and everything. And we had to go out on the deck and bash the ice off with baseball bats and hammers to
What?
like yeah. Yeah, because if you
Really?
get too much ice encasing the ship, it gets top heavy and it'll roll over. So,
It's more.
one
It's more
day the
cold.
captain comes on the
Yeah.
address system and says, "Everybody up on deck. We gotta get the ice off the boat."
Grab a baseball bat. Let's play Minecraft in real life. Start mining all the
Yeah.
ice.
Yeah, but I mean, the seas were high, like, the boat's rocking and rolling. And of course, you don't want to fall off the boat. So, sometimes we were like putting on a harness and tying ourselves to the ship, things like that.
And it took a day and a half for, people found you there. How was it? Like the rescue?
No, there was no rescue. The ice just broke up. So we kept
Okay.
using, we had two small Zodiacs. And so we were trying to pry kind of a hole in the ice and move the ice with the
Mm.
Zodiacs. And we had a helicopter that was like heading forward to see where the open water was. And we were aware that even though we were locked in the ice, we were drifting with the ice. So we were drifting
I got you.
northward,
Okay.
kind of away from our ultimate destination.
It's just
But
scary.
yeah, we just kind of got lucky. Yeah.
And again, just going back a little bit with the currents, because I know Antarctica is very windy, and the currents are all over the place. They're
Mhm.
almost like a wheelworth,
Yeah.
and it's very hard to calculate the currents. Which is
Yeah.
from other cave diving experiences, you can kind of see, okay, this day kind of know
Mhm.
where it goes, but when you're in Antarctica, you don't know. You don't
Mhm.
know. You don't know how is that
Yeah.
dealing with the currents.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So the ice is moving. And
Mhm.
so like it doesn't, like when you're anchored up beside something the size of Jamaica, you don't realize that you're moving. Like, like you feel stationary because you and the dive site are moving. And but you're getting a lot of current from that. You're also getting currents from fresh water melting into seawater, and they're different densities. And also different temperatures. And so you get these vertical currents. Like suddenly you're swimming along and then you hit a vertical current and you're just dropping fast like an elevator, and you have to
It
escape
sucks
the
you in
vertical.
a way.
Yeah, you have to escape that vertical current. So yeah, very, very uncertain. And of course, there's no tide tables that you can refer to down there to even understand the changing tides. So everything was, we've got to make as conservative a plan as possible and know when to turn around. And then based on whatever information we would learn on one particular dive, we would sit down, regroup, and make a new plan to be as safe as possible for the next one. So it really was day-to-day learning.
Learning on the spot,
Mhm.
quite basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you still had guidelines to know how to try to get out of the iceberg.
Yeah. So we can lay, like cave divers have a reel. So it's sort of like a fishing reel, but bigger and with heavier line on it. And we run that string through a cave so that at the worst case scenario, if there's an emergency, if you can't see, you can put your hand around that guideline and follow that as a tactile reference out of a cave. So we can do the same thing in places like Antarctica, but since there's no place to sort of loop the line, we can use ice screws, like these titanium screws that we can put into the ice and tie it off to that and create a bit of a route so that we can retrace our footsteps again. Yeah.
How do you screw it?
Yeah.
So it's got threads on it and little points in the end. So you kind of jam it against the ice and then spin it, and it eats its way into the ice, and the little
With
core
no
spits out
tool,
the
just with the
center.
hand.
Oh, with your
Just
strength?
with your hand. Yeah.
Oh,
Mhm,
fine.
mhm.
Oh
Yeah.
my god.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jill, how?
Yeah, I
Ice
mean,
is
in
That is
thick.
strong.
in a rock cave, like sometimes when we do a combination of dry caving and cave diving, sometimes they'll use like a bolt gun. So it's like a powered device that can shoot a bolt into rock, and then you have an anchor point. But we don't have any technology like that for underwater with the ice. So it's, yeah, you just have to screw those things in by hand. Yeah.
Mm. And do you think that cave diving, it's still in a way unsafe because again, there's a lot of things that can happen. But how can it be safer with new technology that is arriving. I guess mapping out caves in 3D is
Yeah.
super beneficial
Yeah.
to kind of understand past a little bit more, but what more can
Mhm.
be done to also attract newcomers that are a
Mhm.
little bit scared of
Mhm.
like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, well, for about 30 years, I've been doing projects with a man named Dr. Bill Stone, and back in the late 1990s, he built a device that I could drive into a cave, and it would ping the walls with sonar and make a three-dimensional map. And that was the very first time anyone had ever made a three-dimensional accurate map of any cave system, dry or wet. And so that was back in 1997, 98. But since that time, he's continued to develop that technology. And now that same mapper that I used to have to drive through the cave is a fully autonomous, artificially intelligent robot. So we can literally put this device in the water, and it's about my size. It's not in a human form or anything. It's called Sunfish. And it's got little thrusters all over it. But we can put it in the water and tell it to go find a cave, swim into the cave, map it, and bring back the data.
Wow,
And
that's amazing.
yeah, and that's technology that's actually destined for space, for exploring the liquid ocean beneath Europa, Jupiter's moon, has a frozen surface and a liquid ocean beneath. And so the technology is really developed for that, but it's been proven over the past, about 25 years in that development cycle. So yeah, that'll be a lot safer. That Sunfish robot will be able to go to the deepest depths of the ocean or into any cave or out into space and bring us back maps.
I want to see that robot go into Bermuda Triangle, Mariana Trenches type
Yeah,
caves, because
just covering water is a
Yeah.
no
oh my
nowadays.
god,
Yeah.
the sea worms that are probably living there unknown to us, giant
Yep.
squids. Oh my god, just
Yeah.
terrifying creatures that I would love
Yeah.
to know if they existed or not.
Yeah.
Have you ever
Absolutely.
actually going to that? Have you ever encountered like
Yeah, just a
besides the polar bears, like something
weird
that
animal.
you like just weird animal or like
Yeah.
something that you were like, oh, these could be really dangerous to me?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, I see a lot of animals in the north. Walruses are actually probably more dangerous than polar bears to swim with. Um,
Walrus, I had no idea. Are they
yeah,
the
they're
hippos of the Arctic? Because hippos are very dangerous, but they're also very
yeah,
cute.
yeah.
Walrus,
They look
kind of
cute.
like that.
They might be. They might be. They're just incredibly defensive if they're taking
Mm.
care of their young, especially. And the first thing that happens when you jump in the water with a walrus is if it's near like a ice at all, it'll go bash its tusks against the ice just to show you what it'll do with your head if you get any closer. So yeah, so I've had a lot of experiences with what people conceive of as dangerous animals, but I've also had wondrous experiences. Like I remember once jumping off the east coast of Canada into a pod of about 100 humpback whales that were feeding,
Oh,
and a mother came by me. I was in the water for hours, and she came by me repeatedly to show me her calf. And the two of
amazing.
them
That's
would
so
come right by
cute.
Really?
me, so close that they're like literally like running along the edge of my hand.
Oh, I love
And
whales.
after many hours, her husband, this big bull humpback, came by. And when he swam by me, also very close, he brought his tail fluke down like within millimeters of the dome of my camera lens, just and when he
Wow.
did that wake just blew me backwards, tumbling away from him. But the next thing he did as he was swimming away is he let out this massive, like, I don't even know how many pounds, kilos, tons,
All
whatever,
right.
but he let out a giant crap. So now I'm swimming through whale poop, and I was just giddy. I was just laughing because I thought, okay, I get it. I'll get out of the water. I guess I've had my time.
Enough.
The
Enough is
biggest poop
enough.
you ever saw in your life.
Yeah, yeah.
Jesus.
Oh my god, that's amazing. That is
That's pretty
great.
cool.
Uh and I did want to ask you about something again with these creatures, because I feel bad how sharks are represented in media, and
Yeah.
with diving and in cave diving, I'm sure you've encountered countless types of sharks, and the media
Mhm.
always portrays. Now it's getting a little bit better, but still, with horror films and whatever it is,
Yeah.
sharks are
Just a
our main
bad
enemy.
representation of sharks. Yeah.
And
Mhm.
then what it creates is these wanting to hunt sharks to get them out of their own territory. And there's been a
Mhm.
problem again also with the fin soup and all of that, just
Mhm.
reducing shark population to the max. How has
Yeah.
your experience been with sharks?
Yeah.
And yeah,
I
with the
love
stereotypes.
sharks. I love sharks. They don't worry me at all. I'm not on their diet. You know, honestly, like when I see a shark underwater, 99% of the time I terrify the shark. So the shark is thinking, "Oh my God, a human!" is running away. So you see the tail of a shark swimming away. So when I get to see and encounter and spend time with a shark, it's a huge privilege. But yeah, we don't smell like, look like, or taste like anything that they want to
That
eat. Like
human.
whenever someone's injured by a shark, it's usually either like a defensive bite or it's like a, "Are you food?" And it happens to people who are like on the surface like imagine what a surfboard looks like from beneath, with little
Mhm.
arms hanging off the edge of a surfboard and little legs hanging off the edge, just floating on the surface. You look like a sick seal. So yeah, I mean, when somebody gets bit in a scenario like that, it's because the shark thought it was a sick animal, that it could eat, because they're just garbage collectors of the sea. They don't want to chase you down
They
and
don't
hunt
want to
you,
eat you.
No, they don't, especially if you've got like scuba gear on, right?
Yeah.
Probably you won't taste good at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. I want this too.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're more likely to die of a fatal bowling accident than you are to to get bitten by a shark, so it's pretty safe.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I love to
I
break those stereotypes right here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
again, especially me being a huge horror fan, and obviously not being alive at that time, but when Jaws came out, everybody was
Mhm.
like, I hate
Terrified.
sharks, I
Wow.
don't
I
like
love
them,
sharks.
I
Yeah.
don't want to see them ever in my life. And then that created the biggest
Yeah.
panic ever through mainstream media, of course, of Jaws. And then other movies
Yeah.
kind of taking that and putting it in other types of media, like even The Shallows,
Mhm.
very recent film again with shark attacks. Even the movie that we were watching was literally a shark inside a cave.
Yeah.
Basically, it was like a blind shark inside a
Yeah. It
cave.
was about shark attacks and kind of stuff.
Yeah,
That's why we
Okay.
hate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
feel bad because I also
Yeah.
love sharks quite a lot, especially after living in South Africa. Sharks are a
Mhm.
big thing there, and me loving
Mhm.
surfing, it's like, okay, I have to deal with maybe encountering a shark, but knowing how to
Mhm.
prepare myself for the occasion that
Mhm.
that if that happens. And I went to kind of like an excursion to go sightsee sharks, and I saw a great white shark, and
Oh,
one
wow.
of the most beautiful moments in my life. It was
Mhm.
absolutely insane,
They're
absolutely
so
insane.
beautiful. Yeah,
They
they're so
are.
beautiful, and they're such an important part of the food chain. Like if we lose all the sharks, if people keep eating shark fin soup or killing sharks for sport, then we lose the top predator, and that absolutely, has impacts on everything else in the ocean. So it's really important that we keep a healthy shark population.
Yeah, not to mess with the ecosystem at
Under
all.
Mhm.
these
That's what
guys.
us humans love to do. It's like some
Yeah.
people, I don't know why, but they see giraffe and they're like, I want the head of that giraffe. And like, why? Just let it
Why?
do its
Yeah.
thing, or a lion, or
Yeah.
whatever it is. Or
Mhm.
on the other spectrum, which obviously I would feel bad, but it's just how nature works. When you see like a lioness kill a gazelle or something, and you want to
Mhm.
try to save the gazelle, but you're like, no, this is just how nature
Just
is.
yeah. Just let the
Mhm.
nature go happen.
Yeah, ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, the gazelle family's upset, but on the other hand, the
The
lion
lion.
family like managed to feed their cubs.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's all
Exactly.
relative. Hmm.
No, for sure. Just one last thing about this cave diving thing, which is again your travels across the world, which we haven't talked that much, but you take your time to explore caves on very unknown territories. Like let's put aside Antarctica, like
Hmm.
Pacific islands that very few people have visited. Some islands in the Caribbean, even islands in
Mhm.
whatever place it is. What
Yeah.
has been like the craziest of these unknown places that you've been that you're like people should really come here and there should be more tourism
Yeah.
around these location?
Boy. I think one of the unexpected diving projects I was involved in was in the Canary Islands, actually, diving inside an active volcano. So,
Wow,
so
wait, what? Inside
yeah,
an active volcano? How does that work?
yeah. So, um, if you imagine like when a volcano erupts and lava flows down the side of the mountain,
Mhm.
so there's an exterior of that lava flow and the interior is hot lava. So the hot lava keeps flowing. When the hot lava hits the ocean, it creates this huge gas explosion and it keeps on flowing into the sea, and then eventually that outer crust cools and the lava flows inside for a period of time until that also cools. But what's left behind then is a tunnel, and so that tunnel not only goes down the flank of the mountain, the volcano, but it goes under the ocean as well. And so in Lanzarote, I went there to look for unique cave adapted animals inside the world's longest volcanic lava tube. And it was probably 5,000 years old, this tube. And so the seafloor had actually covered a lot of it. So I'm literally like starting inland, going into the water, and then diving down until I'm diving beneath the seafloor in this cave system. And it was the weirdest environment I've ever seen. It was crazy. And then we found a lot of new animals that hadn't been identified by science before.
Wow, were
Well,
they
amazing.
crustaceans? What kind of type of
Yeah, what
animals
kind
Yeah.
of
were
animal was
they?
that?
Yeah, a lot of crustaceans and
Crustacean.
worms, and then there are some cave adapted fish, and then there were some little crabs that were pretty interesting called Munidopsis, and those crabs are found on the deepest ocean vents, those ones that smoke on the seafloor, and they've been
Mm,
found nowhere else except at the bottom of the ocean and in this
Oh,
particular cave. And what's really cool is that there's one surface pool where we start our dives, where tourists can actually walk through the dry part of the cave and they can look into this pool and they can see all these little white tiny crabs, and those are the Munidopsis crabs. And it looks like you're looking at star constellations because you're in this dark cave, but these little white animals are sort of glowing, and they're quite beautiful. Yeah.
wow,
wow.
cave. I'm just
Volcano
trying
cave,
to
man. Yeah.
picture like a tunnel with a different type of rock. I can imagine
Yeah.
like geologists would be, they'll probably
Yeah.
be their favorite day in their lives just
Mhm.
visiting that cave. And
Yeah.
Bro.
Yeah.
and yeah, just how as well like polar opposites, diving inside a volcano, diving inside an
Yeah.
iceberg, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Quite
Yeah.
fascinating. I
Amazing.
love that.
Hey,
Wow,
Jill,
Jill.
I mean, this episode has passed by very fast. We're just
Uh-huh.
coming in of our podcast. But before finishing up our podcast, Guilherme wants to do the question he does every single episode. This question has to be different because since you're
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
from
I know how to
Antarctica, but
plan
we
it.
can actually have, a little bit of adaptation on the question, bro.
For sure,
Feel
for sure.
free.
Before Jill, I could listen to your stories for hours and
Yeah, for
hours.
hours. Yeah.
I share with you a big passion for the ocean. I'm a big surfer.
Mm.
I respect it a lot. I don't fear it. I respect it because I know
Yeah,
the force that it
that's the
has
word. We gotta respect the ocean.
100%. And growing up next to the ocean in Portugal, south of Portugal, I always want to be in it. And in each country that I live in and visit, I always want to try to,
Yeah.
explore and surf as many places as I can. And it's really nice to talk with someone that has that shared passion. So it's a little bit different, being inside caves, but still,
But still the ocean.
100%.
We're all water
Uh,
people.
Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Uh,
And this year, I'm actually even planning on taking my open water certificate for diving. I don't know about cave diving, but because I like the reefs, I like 10 meters. I think that's good enough. But I don't know.
mhm.
We'll see. We'll see if whenever I hear about the bends and nitrogen narcosis, if I still want to do it. But but I'm really interesting to actually take that step and yeah, try to do that this year, hopefully. So for sure.
Fantastic.
And
Fantastic.
yeah, no, please go, please go.
Oh, I was just going to say, two of my colleagues on that Antarctica trip surfed. That was one of their goals, was that they've
Really?
surfed in
Oh,
What?
yeah, they've surfed on every continent in the world, but they hadn't surfed in Antarctica yet. So they made two special designed surfboards, and you'll laugh at this because they were designed by I guess an iconic
and what
surfboard
about the waves
designer.
there?
Yeah, they caught some waves. Yeah, but
Okay.
the
They
cool thing
did.
is the surfboards were designed and painted like orcas. And
Okay.
when the two surfboards came in, like top and bottom, they had the orca patterns on them. And when the surfboards came in, my partner said to the guy who had organized the surfboards, he said, "So how come mine's different than yours?" And he says, "Well, if you look closely, your surfboard is a girl and my surfboard is a boy. So, so if we meet a frisky orca, it's going to go after you."
Oh my god, that's amazing. That's the biggest flex ever. I surfed in
Yeah.
Antarctica.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
god. That is amazing. Wow. And yes, our question, which is going to be a little bit different,
Yeah.
but what is the thing that makes you the most proud about having done this expedition in Antarctica and having been the first person to ever cave dive inside a moving iceberg, and the things that you took from that in advancing science and going back to Canada and showing your friends the footage, the documentary that then came out? What was the thing that made you the most proud about all of that experience visiting Antarctica?
Well, I think like I'm proud that we ran a safe mission and that everyone came home safely. But I think like all of my work, like if I'm going to take a risk, it has to be worth it. It has to deliver something maybe new for me, but hopefully new for humanity. And I hope that these adventures allow me to tell stories that bring people's attention to big global issues. And now, sea level rise, climate change is in the forefront of everybody's mind. And so I'm
Mhm.
glad to contribute to that global knowledge.
100%. And
Amazing. Yeah.
and once again, from someone who was just a creative person, a bachelor's in arts, and now advancing science and making information more accessible for future generations,
For everybody. Yeah. For the world.
it's incredible to being here to speak with you and you telling us all
Amazing.
about these amazing stories and expeditions and yeah, these new discoveries in a way.
Oh,
So thank you so much.
thanks.
Yeah. We are very
Oh,
lucky
it's been,
to have you as a guest right here, Jill. Thank you so
oh,
much.
thanks. It's been great speaking with you.
Likewise, and hopefully one day we get to meet and we get life together. That would be one of my dreams. Absolutely. Even if it's
Absolutely.
in Canada, in the sweet waters, in like 5 meter, whatever it is, still diving, that would be amazing. That would be amazing.
Awesome.
Amazing, Jill. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation once again. And I see that you got 2 books right there. Do you want to do any share for our
Oh,
listeners or kind of
sure.
stuff?
Yeah. I mean, my memoir, my
Yeah.
book, Into the Planet, My Life as a Cave Diver, that's available on Amazon all around the world, and it has quite a lot of storytelling from that Antarctica project, and
Nice.
then my children's book, The Aquanaut, is very similar. It's about sort of embracing fear and your imagination to do things you never imagined you could do. So you can get information about those at intotheplanet.com or buy them on Amazon.
Okay.
Amazing.
Amazing.
Amazing. And I'm very happy that you did a children's book, because some children may be absolutely terrified of swimming, and once they see like the beauty and embracing fear and just trying
Yeah.
out, maybe they're like, oh, actually now
Getting the
I'm just going
guts.
to try to go to the beach and not be scared
Yeah,
of anything. So for that
I
is
hope so.
absolutely amazing. Definitely.
Amazing.
So to our guests, listeners, thank you so much for reaching the end, and be sure to follow us at podcast WWP on Instagram and Facebook, and also leave us a review. What did you think of this episode, guys? Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Let us know
Yeah.
if you go on this Antarctic expedition as well.
And leave us a comment
Anytime
on
in your lives.
Spotify. Now they got a new feature right there. where you can guys just comment about the episode. So feel free to just leave us a comment about this episode.
100%. And see you guys in our next episode in
See you
the next
guys.
week. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.